Hey guys, welcome back to AJ Tech. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing part 3 of the Java series that I've been working on. And today we're going to start doing methods. We're going to talk about methods. So a method is pretty much like a piece of code that's separated, that you can call by name. So let's say we want to print out hello. So let's do it again. System.out.println hello. Okay. So we would run this and we have hello. But let's say we wanted to print out like hello world in 2 separate statements instead of one, like this, and then we had world. And we wanted to do this multiple times. So instead of keep copying and pasting, making the code very long, what we could do is we can make a method. So what you do is, this is a method right here, the main method that we usually, it usually runs the stuff that comes out in the terminal. So we can make another method called, let's say, public void, and I'll explain what those words mean, and then we can call it print. Okay, and then we can put this code that we want it to run in here, and then we can just do print. So then of course, because this is static, this has to be static too. And I'll explain that later. But anyways, so now we have this statement that should run this code. So the nice thing about this, the reason people use methods is because, let's say we want to do this multiple times, it would do it, because it's just running every time you run this piece. It's just going to this method called print and then running everything between the 2 brackets. So the nice thing about this is, let's say we want to change it to hello people. We would change it once here, and then everywhere in our code, everywhere we have that statement, it would change. So it helps with the abstraction of the code, so you don't have to go back through and fix it every time. You just do it once here, and then wherever you've used this method, it's going to be automatically fixed. So that's why it's really useful in long code, and it's really useful in general, instead of having to go back and debug every single time. You have a generalized way of just fixing all the code. And so let me start to explain some of some of these words mean. Okay, so first of all, let's write what a method is. So a method is like an area of code can be a reference to run in other code. Okay, so first of all, I want to explain what this word, I want to go through each part of the method header, I guess. So first of all, I want to explain what public means. So the word public, the first part, public, means that any class can access it in the same folder. So we haven't gotten there yet, but let's say we have another class instead of class main. If it's public, then you can access this this method. But if it was private, you could only access it in this class main, between these 2 brackets. So yeah, so it can be public or private. And now there's something called protected, but we're not going to talk about that today. So public means means that the method can be accessed by another class, while private means only this class. That only this class can access it. Okay. Now let's go to the next part. So static. So static is kind of hard to like understand when you're a beginner. So for now, let's just not talk about it that much. Let's just remember that the main method where everything is run is static always. And since this is static, we have to make anything in the main class static. But I don't really want to get into what static means because it's kind of complicated. So we'll do that later. Okay. So let's go to the next part, void. So void is whether the method can return something. So void means it does not return. The method does not return anything. Return like a value. So what I mean by that is, let's say we wanted a method that would return an int, for example. So we could put static int print, and then we would have, if it's not void, if it's some variable, so it can be int, it can be object, primitive, int, strings, whatever you want, that you have to have a return statement. And this return statement pretty much means that this like piece of code will become equal to a variable pretty much. So let's say we want it to return hello people. So after running this code, it returns this value right here. So then you could do this. You could do system. Let me delete these. 1 second. System.out.println, and then we can have the print method inside of it. So then, not only will it execute these two commands, it's then going to return this value right here. And I messed up, it should be string. Okay, so it's going to return this value right here. So that means that this statement will become equal to this value, whatever you return. So then if we go through this, it's going to print this, since this is part of the method. This is the first command. Then it's going to print this. And then since we have the actual method inside of a print statement, it's going to become equal to hello people and print hello people pretty much. And we can demonstrate this. And you see hello people and then hello people, this return statement. So this is useful because, let me get on to the next point. So, in the print, like inside of the method, right, between the two parentheses, you can like take inputs. So let's say you want to make, you want to make a method that can add two values, add two ints. So we can call it add int, for example, or whatever. It could be the same thing, but I'm just making it add int just so it would make more sense. So, and then we would change this into an int. It's going to return an int. And then you can do something called parameters. So parameters, you can say like the method takes in an int x, you can call it x, you can call it whatever, and an int y. And since let's say this method you're making is supposed to add whatever you put into it, so you can have return. You can just have return. You can like return x plus y. So then you can do add int, and then you can have 2 plus 4, for example, and then you'll get 7, because what happens is, since this method takes in two parameters, so you can put in two things that will be like that can be used in the method. It will be able to take whatever you put in for x. It calls it x in the method. You can call it whatever you want, and then whatever you put in for y, and then you can do whatever you want. In this case, we return the sum of the two ints. And then since it's a return, like since it's not a void method, it's actually a return method, this whole statement becomes the return value. So this whole statement right here becomes equal to this, whatever you return, which in this case, the sum of the two ints that you put into the method. And this is a really simple example. There are like a lot more like more advanced examples that could be used. Let's say you want to put in a string, for example, and you want to return the last letter of the string. So we can call this, for example, last letter. And then you can have string X, for example, or Y, or whatever, string 1, str. And then last letter, it just takes a string and then returns a string. Or we can return a character. Let's return a character. So you can do return equals, like the method that we learned in the last video. We could do str dot char at, and then another method that we learned, the dot length, parentheses, so the length method for strings. So str dot length -1, because this would be the second, like the last index, since indices started 0 and length -1. So in this case, this would return the last letter, and we can prove this by say last letter of Amazon. It's gonna print out the N because that's the last character. So that's another example of something. And the nice thing about this is, let's say you want to change what this method does. You could have this statement you could just do this. Like, it is possible to just have this every time you're going to do that. But then it just makes your code look a lot messier. So that's why we use methods, and it's going to be a lot easier to debug later on. Like, let's say you want to change what this method does throughout the whole code. You just change it once here, and no matter how many times you've used it, it's still gonna, like, it's gonna change everywhere. So it's a way of abstracting the code, making the code a little bit easier to deal with. So yeah, so return, so this right here, the after the public static, is always either void or some variable that will be returned. And the thing is, if you have it as a variable, you have to have let me write this down. So if it is a variable, you have to have a return statement. So like we have here, or let's say you had an if statement, you have to have a return, like a return command has to be executed always, no matter like whether it's, like, let's say we have an if statement, for example. If if 10 is greater than 1, and then we return. If there's a possibility of this being false, like let's say we had a variable x and int x was equal to 10. So it's true right now. But if there's even a remote possibility of it being false, you have to add an else statement and have a return something. So you cannot have, like, a return statement has to be executed every single time. You cannot have a scenario where the return statement is not executed, or you're going to have an error in your code. So that's for the return. And then I want to elaborate on the parameters. So parameters, the parameters are the things inside of the parentheses of a method. And these can be, you can have 0 parameters, you can have 10, 100, and they can be any variable. So ints, any primitive booleans, or any object, strings, arrays, anything. You can even, like, we can show the string array R, for example. And then like let's say int index, and you can call this whatever you want to call it. Like it's just a variable, so you can pick whatever you want, like whatever makes it easier for you in your code. So but the thing is, when you're gonna be inputting stuff here, you have to keep track of, was this the first parameter? So the first thing has to be in array, for example, now. So we have to do like a let's say you either had an array in the code, for example, string array equals, let's say, hello, or something like this. Or so you can either do this and then put R in here and then have the int, or I want to show this with the int. You can do int like, or you can have it just like the actual int. You don't even have to like have a variable set to it. Like we can put 10 here, even though we don't have a variable set equal to 10. We can just put the 10, or we could even do what we did here. We can just take this and put it in for the array like this. That's okay. Actually, I'm not sure about that actually. I think it's okay for ints and strings, but I don't know about arrays. Arrays, you might have to do this for the arrays actually. So you might have to do like initialize them. Like initialize it in here if you want. Or for arrays, actually, I think you might have to initialize it on the outside and then put it back in. But anyways, like I don't know why you would initialize it in here anyway. Like for int, alright, but for array, I don't know why you would do it in here. It would probably be manipulated, and then you would, like the result of whatever you did to the array would be put into the method. And you can make methods that return arrays. You can do all kinds of things. But with these rules of having parameters and return, like either having returns or not returns, and all these rules, you can make a lot of combinations. And you can even have methods inside of methods. So let's see this. So we can do like public print character, or public print char or something. So public static void print char that doesn't have any parameters, and then it just does system dot print, or we can input a char. So we can take a character in and then print that out. So we can use this print char method for, let's say, before we return, we want to print char, like we want to print the statement before we return it. We can, for example, use this method. Oh yeah, I need to fix this. 1 second. Okay. And then you can just put hello. And you will print, because you're using a method inside of another method. And these can get really complicated, because you can use a method inside of a method and so on. But these are the main things about a method, and I really wanted everybody to start to get to know these, because these are always used in Java and any programming language, and they make the code a lot more efficient and easier to debug. And yeah, anyways, I think that's going to be all for this video. Hopefully you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.